Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
So good.
Nice. Do you have a good break?
Yeah, great. New Year's. Super excited to be out of 2020.
Me too. Although it doesn't feel different yet, but it will. It will
It does.
soon.
I'm counting on that feeling coming.
Word.
Looks like we've got Jerome with us.
Yeah, what's up, Drum?
Sorry, I was otherwise occupied.
You good? Just saying hi.
Hello, how are you guys doing today?
Good. So hopefully we got some more people coming. We'll give them a
Have
few
a
more
good
minutes.
New Year's Eve, holidays.
Yes, indeed. I hope you did as well.
I survived. Didn't kill anybody.
That's always a good thing.
Hi Ben, how you doing?
Hey, what's up, Giovanni?
Hi everyone.
So thank you guys very much for letting me in. I just want to tell you right up front, whenever my wife calls me for dinner, I got to go. So
Sounds good. Sounds good. We'll see if any more people show up in just a. We'll give them another 1 or 2 minutes, and we'll just start. All right. Well. Oh, Debbie, if you wanna send us off, you're welcome to. I think these guys have been here before, so I don't know if you really need to say anything, but obviously you are more than welcome to. Oh, we got someone else.
Seems like we've got some repeat people here, but just a reminder that this event is put on by V-School via Ben, and Ben is amazing. If you are interested in V-School or know anybody who's interested in V-School, I'm the director of admissions and we do referral bonuses. So if the person you refer starts, they get $500. Or you get $500, not them.
That would be awesome.
Right?
Them.
So, reach out to me. I will put my phone number in the chat. And I'd love to chat with anybody if they have questions about this event or anything else that vSchool puts on. But yeah, Ben is a fantastic teacher, as y'all know, so I'll turn the time back over to him.
Sweet. Thanks, Debbie. All right. Looks like Sharon, I'm not sure I recognize your name. Are you a newcomer?
Yeah, first time. I just saw the topic.
Awesome.
And, so.
Beautiful. Well, welcome. I'm sorry that you joined on part 6 of a 6-part series. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of still make it accessible as possible to you. Do you have any React experience or TypeScript experience at all?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay, cool. So then hopefully we'll get something. You'll get something from this.
Are the previous sessions recorded by chance, or?
They're on the vSchool blog page. Well, they're YouTube videos, but there's links to there are links to the YouTube videos from the blog page. So part 4 is kind of different. It's actually not part 4 because no one was there that day except for Jerome and I think one other person, and neither of them had done TypeScript before. So we kind of went right back to the beginning on that day. So just so you know, part 4 is kind of like part 1, but the other ones are in order and they're more or less progressive.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah. So just to kind of give me an idea, like how would you rate your experience with TypeScript? Like in terms of just like, I don't know, knowledge or like comfort level?
I've been managing teams for the last couple of years, doing React and TypeScript. So every so often I'll get in, fix some bugs. I've done some of the React. There's a React class in particular using TypeScript that I've done on Udemy, I think it was. So I've done a fair amount.
Oh, okay. So this might be too basic for you. I'm not sure, but hopefully I can answer any questions you might have. Sure. Maybe there's a nugget of new stuff in here. Who knows? We'll find out. But I won't be offended if you already know all this stuff.
No worries, it's all good.
Cool. Sweet. All right, let's do this thing. So today, this is part 6. So we're gonna today the goal is to kind of look at all the stuff we've learned with types up to this point and apply it to just some basic React things, especially hooks. So I'm mostly gonna focus on hooks today, as well as just some of the like basic types that React kind of come or ship with by default. We're not going to look at, declaration files. If we get time, maybe, but that's a little out of the scope of this. So we may or may not get to declaration files. So first thing, let me share my screen. So, okay. Now, just to save some time, I already installed this, but so Create React App is cool because it comes with a TypeScript template by default, which is cool. Or I guess it's not really by default, but you can flag it. You can give it a template. So the command to run, if you are curious, is npx create React app, and then you just give it a template flag, TypeScript, and then you give it the folder or location path name to where you want the React app to be initialized in. So, for example, if this was an empty folder, I would just do it here, or wherever I want it to be. But that's the script. So template TypeScript. So it's really cool. So you don't have to like if you just need to get something up and running, this is a great way to just get started. Webpack, doing it from scratch with Webpack is fairly involved. So I decided not to do that today, but you can also, Webpack comes with a Typescript compiler loader, which is pretty cool. So you can use that as well. But today we're just going to play around with what Create React App gives us. So this is what you'll get. You'll get this should look familiar to anyone that's initiated a Create React App project. The only difference that you'll notice, of course, is all these files are now TSX as opposed to JSX. So that's really the only difference, aside from the obvious fact that the syntax is using TypeScript now. Even the tests are in TypeScript, which is cool. So you'll notice this new file. So I haven't mentioned these up to this point, but they're called declaration files, and they end with a .d.ts. And like I said, I'm not going to focus too much on these, but if we have time, we'll talk about those later. So, okay, everything is pretty normal. I'm gonna just to simplify things, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of empty out some of this stuff, and we'll just start with like a very simple little app here. Okay, not gonna worry about that CSS. Don't really care about the tests and stuff, so I'll just get rid of that. Okay, don't really care about that either. Alrighty, and don't care about that. So, and don't care about that or that. Okay, so the first thing is in React, there are just some basic types that it ships with. And they all exist on the React namespace. So when you import React from the React module, you're not only getting all the methods and functionalities and stuff, you're actually getting all the types that come with it as well, which is kind of cool. So for example, if I'm going to write a component, I can do it this way. So in the React app, by default, they use these function declarations. Although it has kind of become a little bit more conventional to write these as function values instead. So instead of the function app, it's typical to do something like this. So this has kind of become a little more conventional. Oops. My formatter. Okay, anyways, so, but you'll notice that in TypeScript, it's telling me that it can infer the type of what this function is just by looking at the return value. So notice app is a function noted by the arrow that's returning a JSX element. So that's the first thing. It's the first type, I guess, that we'll introduce, the idea of a JSX element, which is anything that's written using JSX syntax. That should be hopefully straightforward. So if, and a React component, by its definition, should return a React element or a JSX element. But we'll get into a little bit more about the other types that exist too, because there are several. But let's first of all just do a very basic type definition for a generic component like this. Let me first run this, and I'm going to create a lint config just so we can kind of have something to, just so our linter can kind of spit out a little bit more information as we're coding. let's just make sure this runs. We should see a little test guy in the corner here. Just a sec. Oh, right. I got rid of that. I got rid of that. Okay. Yeah, I got rid of that. Okay. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. Okay. Our app's running. It's working. Beautiful. There it is. Okay. First thing I'm going to do, let's install my linter. Yeah, we'll just write a little script here that will allow us to initiate a little lint config. This will just show some of the TypeScript errors that you're most likely to hit when you're doing this stuff. Almost. There we go. Okay. See this guy. It's going to ask a few questions. Yes, and I want to check syntax, JavaScript modules. I'm using React. Yes, it uses TypeScript, runs in the browser, but also Node. We'll do JSON. Yes, I do want to install the latest plugins. This takes a couple more seconds. Okay, so while that's going, we're going to look at some of the things that React provides. So there's some really cool stuff here. So my autocomplete is being very friendly, and it's letting me know some of the things that exist on the React namespace. So some of these you should be pretty familiar with. Component, create context if you've used context before. Create ref, maybe you've seen before. Use context, use effect. I would assume you guys are familiar with that. And use state. So these are all the things that are available on the React namespace. These things in stars are essentially the types for these particular kinds of values. So we're going to take a look at, not all of these, but we're going to look at component, because that's kind of the most common one, given the fact that React is literally just a sequence of components, or a tree of components. A React app is made up of a tree of components. Cool.
Tree of components and JSX elements is the same thing?
Sort of. So a component is usually referred to as the function that generates the JSX element. So technically, you've got your actual tree is the tree of JSX elements, which are really just objects that make up the virtual DOM. The functions, the components, are just functions that produce that tree. So there's a subtle distinction there. All right, let's run this linter. Okay, here's our, oh, here we go, beautiful. So we got yes, browser true, awesome. Node is also true, okay. Okay, here's my stuff. All right, okay. Now we're having some, now our linter is doing a little more work for us, which is nice. So, okay, I've defined this app as a function that's returning this, but my linter, based on the rules that I've determined, which I've just used the defaults, is it's missing return type on this function. Okay, now this is nothing to do with React. This is just the fact that If you're going to define something, especially a function, you should type it. This is just linter saying, hey, you should you should be more specific with your type. So I will say yes, linter. Let's do that. So when we're defining a React component, there's a couple ways we can do it. So because TypeScript is structural in the sense that what defines a type is just how the shape of that value looks like. So whether it has the same name as another type isn't as important as the shape. So we could have an alias called React component. We can also define our function inline here, which we'll do it both ways, so you can kind of see how they're equivalent. So in this case, when you're defining a function, the most common thing to do is you define the types of the parameters and you define what the type of the return value is. So if you're defining the return type of a React component, then well, by definition, a React component has to return a React element, right? It has to return either JSX or something that produces JSX. There are also a couple other things that make up a React element. Strings, arrays of strings, arrays of elements, there's all those various combinations. And if you're not sure what composes a React element, the docs spell it out pretty clearly. But we'll just use the React element type to define a return value. JSX element is also fine. The only problem with this is that actually, I don't know. I haven't actually tried this before. I'm not sure if that'll work. Yeah, see, like that won't work. It's not an array of strings is not a JSX element, whereas a React element that actually should work. Oh, no. Okay. That doesn't work. I guess it has to be. I actually haven't tried that before. So I can now, my div will work perfectly. There are other things that I can do as well. I should, does a string work? No, a string doesn't work. Only there we go. Cool. Now, that's the return value of the function or our React component. Let's define the types of the arguments. Now, in a React component specifically, there's only one argument. What is that? You guys probably know this. What are they called?
Prop.
Yep, it's props. So this is one right off the bat, being able to define this object here is pretty awesome because one of, I think, the most confusing parts for new students or people new to TypeScript and React, mostly React generally, is that this is a very abstract concept, this thing of props. Like what my students always seem to struggle with was like, what is this thing? Where does it come from? Why does it have certain properties? Like, how does this matter? And what I've found is that when you type, when in TypeScript, when you have this ability to actually give this a type, which is just, in this case, we'll use an interface, it helps actually alleviate that abstraction. It helps you go like, oh, I know what this looks like. Like, I don't have to like try to imagine it in my head. Like, I know exactly what this is. So now we have a couple options here. I can simply say, okay, props, you're an object that has some property. Let's say foo. Okay, and we'll say you're a string. Okay, I can define it in line like that just fine. Not the most ideal thing, because as this gets bigger and bigger, it kind of crowds the space. But one thing I want to point out is this is really cool. When we go to our app component, suddenly it's saying that, hey, you're missing a property. Property foo is missing. So right there off the bat, TypeScript has become incredibly useful because now it is very obvious that this component needs some special props in order to compile properly. Well, in order for TypeScript to compile properly. If I were using normal JavaScript, there's no way to enforce that at all. It would look just fine. That's one of the downsides of JavaScript, is that it's a little too lenient. So in this case, I would say, oh, it's missing foo. So I'll just say foo and then bar. Okay, now our compiler error goes away. We still got a linting error though. In this case, it's saying that, you know, my object is declared but not used. So we'll just say props.foo just for good measure. So now we just should see bar. Boom.
Quick question.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I usually don't use props. I usually destructure foo in the parentheses. How would I do that?
Same way. So if you're doing it in line, so this is not the ideal way to define the type of your object. So if you wanted to destructure that, what you do is you define an interface. And we'll call this app props. And then we'll define our thing here. And then when we say, instead of saying props, we can now just say foo props, like that. So we're still able to say, hey, this object is app props. Makes sense. So then, like, what's nice about this is that as you're destructuring, it'll auto complete for you, because it's smart enough to now know, oh, hey, this has a property called foo, and whatever other properties it may have, you know, ID or something. So that's one way to do it. I personally prefer, I don't like to destructure personally in most cases, only because I like to see what context that value is a part of. Because as you get bigger and bigger and more objects on the page, it's kind of nice to know what properties or what values are kind of wrapped together with other ones. But that's kind of a personal preference.
Makes sense.
So that's how you do that. Okay, well, the one problem with this though is suppose I have a slightly more dynamic component than this. Suppose you've probably seen the props.children concept, which is the idea of being able to say, which is the ability to be like, hey, here's a div, dynamic child, right? So I should also be able to do this. And in React, those are called children. And that's kind of a built-in concept to props. And so one downside of defining it this way is that I kind of have to manually handle that. Now, I could do something like this. I could say, children, you're an array of React elements. And then when I do my props.children, it'll work. And let me get rid of this foo just so it's not yelling at me for not using it. Oh, right. Okay. So, right. So, okay, this works. The only problem is, well, now if I wanted to have multiple children, well, now I've got to kind of deal with this situation. Now I could just say, okay, well, you're either a single React element or you're an array of React elements. That could be one way to get around this, the typing of children in a dynamic way. However, there's an easier way to do this. React actually gives us basically kind of a template for props so that we don't have to manually define this. So for example, we can start with our props. Like we can say, okay, look, you have this property. Okay, cool, great. We can accommodate that. So we're going to say, okay, here's my span with my props.foo. Oops. Okay, totally arbitrary, but there we go. Cool. But then if I also want to say props.children, then I can say, okay, use app.props as your container for all of your custom props, the things that you define, but then also combine that with the template that React provides. So we can also say props. Oh, wow. Okay, this is actually new. They have deprecated that. This is interesting. Huh. Man, they changed this stuff so fast. All right, this is used on all clients to pass ref and key to create elements. It's no longer necessary due to intersection types. If you need to declare props object before passing it to create element or factory, use class attributes. Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so let's look at, so it looks like instead of using props, there's now a concept of class attributes. This is new. This is new to me. Huh. I have to look into that a little more because this isn't working the way that I'm used to it working.
Probably you can still use the always, just it would be, I assume.
Yeah, like the other way would be fine. But there are things like ref and stuff that are actually kind of helpful. So I'm not sure why. This is interesting. Look at that again. Oh, here we go. It looks like they have one called props with children now. Okay, cool. So, okay. So it looks like they've kind of added some things. These look new to me. Okay, cool. So let's look at this props with children. So this is what I was hoping to find. Here we go. Now there's no problem. So what this type gives us is basically, and if you look at the type, it's actually really simple. It takes a generic type argument, P, used of course as props, and all it's doing is using the union operator to define a type that's a combination of whatever this is and this property called children, which is a React node. So that's pretty cool. So now I don't have to manually define children here. I can just use this wrapper type to combine it with my custom types and still be able to have a functioning component. This is the proper way to do it if you're going to define your component inline like this. So now of course. Let's just make it happy. There we go. Okay, so does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Cool. Notice this process with children, it's using this React node. I believe that was actually the type I was looking for earlier. So React node is a bit of a, is a bit of a more lenient type, or I should say a more expansive type, which includes React element inside. So if I wanted to return a string, I can. Okay, and it looks like doing that. Okay, cool. Nice. So React has actually been updated a lot since I've used it. So this is a little bit of a learning experience for me. So
Yeah, I was checking that you don't need to use the import anymore.
oh, like this part?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. It's weird because it ships with that. Like it still has that in it when you download the or when you create the React app, but
I haven't tried though. I just read that. So
yeah.
maybe I am wrong about that.
Yeah, this is interesting. String number boolean. So when I look at that, oh, I see, because you can't. Yeah, interesting. Cannot return React node because it's not a valid JSX element. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Could do this though. And then this is going to say, okay, oh, well, my linter thinks that it needs to be there. I can't, I don't really know if that's my linter yelling at me about it. So I'm not sure if it actually cares. It might still compile, but anywho. Okay, so it doesn't like my string.
I don't use children. Actually, I never use children. Is those children needs to be div or it can be also custom components?
Oh yeah, they can be any JSX element. Like it's literally whatever you put in here is what children is.
Okay.
You can also do this if you wanted. It can be literally whatever you want. But if you're going to use it as like an actual like HTML child, then you just put it in here, and then you can just say React.children or sorry props.children somewhere in your output. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So React element is in general what you're going to want to use here for when you're returning, when you're defining the return type of a component. There's also another way to define this. So this is a little bit verbose. So sometimes it can be nice to just define your function itself. So function component is usually this is the most common function type, or sorry, component type. It's just the functional component, right? There are other ones as well. FC, I believe, is just a wrapper for the function component. Yeah, so it's just to make it short. So what we can do here is say, hey, app, you are a function component that takes props with children of app props. Why isn't children is missing in props validation? What?
Yes, lint.
Why is my linter not liking that? That's weird. props validation. Man, I've never seen that before. Foo is missing in props validation.
What do you have in the quick fix?
So this says this is never.
that's
Oh,
okay.
disable prop types. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder. Huh, no, there's no. Let me look at the ESLint. I wonder if there's a. No, but I don't see anything obvious here.
Does it matter the order? Like Typescript, like if you put a plugin Typescript in the beginning, it matters. That's like the first
Yeah,
one.
whatever's last will get overridden by whatever comes after it.
Mhm.
So this is the right order for that.
Mm.
This is very, very interesting. I wonder why that shows up. Foo is missing in props validation. React prop types. Because what's interesting is like, is that this is literally just, it's a function component that takes some object as props. And so that's all we're doing. So then that means that props is just this. What's weird to me is the fact that if I do this, this works just fine. So which defeats the purpose of, it's like redundant to have to write that twice. It's really interesting. Why would that? Huh, I'll have to look into that error. That's really strange because I've never encountered that before.
But it's just a warning, right? It's not like an error.
It's a linting error. So it has, my linter is not liking it. So for some reason it can't seem to glean enough information just from this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's weird to me that would do that. I wonder if just React component, I wonder if that, yeah, so that's the same kind of problem where I wonder if it has to do with, let's look at the definition. This will be so if we look at how this is defined, actually, you know what? I want to look at how just the first one's defined. This will be educational. Let's look at how the function component is actually defined under the hood. So it is a function that takes props and outputs a React element or nothing. Okay. Okay. Prop types is a weak validation map. So I'm not sure what that is. I guess it just, all right. So it takes some type, it looks inside of it, and then says, hey, is it null? Put it through this validator. Okay, so it's validating the type. Let's see what that validator does.
What the P stand for?
Say what?
What is the P stand for in 548 at the end?
Oh, right here. Oh, P is this generic type right here.
Okay, generic type.
So this is represents props essentially, because when you're defining a function component, you're saying, hey, you are an object, but because it's unknown what that object is going to be, it's a generic type here. So it's like whatever that is, we know it's an object, but whatever it contains, we're going to define our types with that in mind. So props with children is going to be some object P combined with this object that has a children property.
And what is that question mark colon? Is that
And
a
then
new syntax?
Yep, and that's the syntax for optional. So,
Option, okay.
yep, so this can mean some optional property.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then, so if we look at this, so I think the problem is in this weak validation map. So if we look at this, it's saying, okay, a weak validation map is basically just a property that exists in the, in what that object is. And then, it gets put through this series of type checks. So it's asking the question, does the property here on that object, is it null? If it's null, then we're going to pass it through the validator like that. Otherwise, if it's undefined, we're going to pass it through a validator. The same thing. Otherwise, we're going to pass it through. It's weird because those are all the same. Oh, it's just the order in which it's getting passed through. Okay. Okay, let's look at this validator property. I wonder if I can. No, I can't go to the definition of validator, but I can search for it. Here we go. How this validator works. Okay, so it's just a property, prop name, component name. Okay. Interesting. So I'm wondering if it's asking me to define some prop types on here, which seems redundant to me. Prop types are supposed to be props with children, it's weak validation map. Yeah, I guess it doesn't like string is not assignable to type. Huh. Very interesting. So if I do a, let me look at what that is again. Validation map. I want to look at this. Look at this validator again. Function, it takes props, prop name, component name, location, and returns either error or a null. Okay. So does that mean that this has to be a function? That's weird. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that lets us be a lot more specific about what kinds of things this could be. That's actually kind of cool.
But that's not React Typescript, right? This is prop types is.
Yeah, so this is so prop types is still a part of React.
Mm-hmm.
What this is doing though is if we're going to define this guy as a function component, then if we use this guy, like if we want to use this, then this forces us to use this as well. So I could just do all. So now if we go back to that, so gives it our props, our prop name, component name. So it's either an error or null. So that means, so suppose, so here's our props, return props dot foo. Let's say it equals, find something that's invalid, then we'll invalid foo property. Otherwise, we're fine. So now this is just a guess. I don't know if this will. Oh, it's unreachable.
But foo is not prop. It's not a function, right?
No, but foo isn't a function, but the object that it's being handed, at least based on the way I read this. Now I could be reading this wrong. Yeah, so if we look at what this guy's expecting, so function component, and then it's looking at prop types. So it's saying, hey, prop types, you are this guy. So a weak validation map, if we look at what the shape of that is, it's telling us, okay, you are an object, okay, and you have properties of that object, or sorry, this object is made up of properties in this object that we give it, right? Saying key and key of t. So do you exist? And you're either null or you're a validator, essentially. It's saying you're either null or undefined or you're validator. I know this is written several times, but really it's just asking the question, is that value, meaning is the value that I provide, so in this case, if I did that, right, so that doesn't work. That doesn't work either.
Can we say foo is I have done like prop type that string.
Right, and then there's app dot, there's what is it, prop types
Yeah.
dot, yeah. And that's where you say, I think that probably exists here. Right, prop types, yeah. Oh, that's a type. That's not a value. That won't work.
Yeah, it's import prop types from prop types. Or that too. I believe it doesn't.
Yeah, so there's no,
somewhere.
there is no prop types on React. I think you'd have to get it from the actual.
Yeah, it's import prop types from prop types. Yeah. Just confusing the lowercase. But
Yeah. Now, that's really interesting because type string. Okay, so that means that, huh. Defined, right. That's weird, because if I were to do that, that would probably work. Yeah, okay. But if I want that to be required, oh, right. Isn't it like is required? There we go. That's, I don't like that because that's just so redundant having to do that.
But you have to use prop types also?
Well, that's what, so if I use function component, now this is new, as far as I can tell. I've never had to do that before. This, it looks like this is kind of forcing you to be even more explicit about what counts as a valid property on this object, or sorry, on this object, which is props basically. So like looking at this, we go back to this weak validation map. So it looks like prop types, weak validation. Let's look at prop types. Let's look at, why doesn't that? Huh. Looking in the actual prop types. Oh, right, because that is a prop types dot. Oh, it's a requirable. Here we go. All right, this is what I was looking for. Interesting. So this is a validator. So again, a validator is just a function that takes props as an argument, prop name, component name, location, stuff like that, and then either outputs an error or null. So prop types, the library prop types is kind of handling a lot of that stuff. That's essentially what we're being given here, right? We're saying prop type string is required, or by not putting required, it kind of means that this isn't correct. I'm just surprised that it doesn't just let us do it that way. I mean, it could be my linter being overly zealous. Because it's saying that foo is missing in my props validation, which is this prop types thing. So I could probably, I don't really like overriding rules just to get rid of annoying messages, but I probably could do, there's probably something about prop types maybe. I'm not sure. I'd have to look for it because that's, it's not showing up in that list. Let's look at the quick fix. What does it say? Right. Okay. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I don't like that. Like, that's so redundant. Why? TypeScript does this for you. There's no need for this. This is a stupid rule. It's a really stupid rule. Yeah, React prop types. I don't like that. It's a dumb rule. That will be enough. What's it called? React prop types. Is the wait, sorry, I forget what the it's off. Question is, will that actually get rid of my error? Oh, weird. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Anyways, that's a dumb rule. It's redundant. I don't know why my linter is not dealing with that better. It's like really dumb. But oh well, learned some things. That's cool. So
yeah, it seems it's only Linton problem. Too strict.
yeah, like there's no reason for that.
I don't use that one. I use Airbnb, but I don't know if it's a big difference.
Yeah, that one's a good one. I tend to use the default one just because it's default. Okay, here we go. So now there's no problem. I just needed to like close that tab and reopen it. VS Code is being a little flaky.
Gotcha. To like restore.
Alrighty. So yeah, that's just a dumb rule. This basically does everything you need. If you needed some sort of like dynamic validation, you could do that with TypeScript. Like I don't really see a reason for using prop types. Using prop types and TypeScript at the same time, to me, is like using a wrench to hold a screwdriver to screw in a screw. Like it's just silly.
Makes
All
sense.
right. So sorry to go on that tangent. Anywho.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so this lets us. This is just plenty for what we need. I think in most cases, I like defining it this way because it's pretty clean. You can define a custom interface there. You can define this guy there, and there's no problem. It's fantastic. All right. So, all right, let's talk about hooks because that's kind of where this becomes really, really powerful. So let's say, I know this is the example that everyone uses in every React app, but let's do a button clicker where it just tracks the counts of your clicks. So now obviously we could use state here. So I'll do it using state first, just like in line of the component, and then we'll break this out into an actual hook and an actual component, so you can kind of see how this stuff comes together. So here we'll just say, okay, here's my count and here's my set count. Goals React.use state, and we'll start with 0. And then we'll just say do a p tag span. This will be our count. Get rid of the children because we don't need those. All right, cool. And then we'll just have a button. Let's have a function that is click. So here's our event. And what's cool about TypeScript again is that I can do stuff like this. I know that this is a click event.
So we didn't need to say props with children. Oh, because we don't have children. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not. I am not using children anymore. 'Cause
That makes sense.
Overkill for our example. And in fact, I'll get rid of foo as well. In fact, let's call it initial count, for example, which will just be a number. Then this will just be our props.initial count. And then now we can go over here and say, okay, initial count is 0. So the thing I love about using TypeScript in React is that all your props are auto-filled for you. It's fantastic. Okie dokie. So, all right. So what we're going to be doing is now we've got this click handler, which is going to add one to our count. So we'll take count plus 1. What's cool is these events now I'm not using this event, but I'm doing this just as a demonstration is React comes with a whole bunch of types for being able to define various types of events. So a mouse event is obviously covers clicks and double clicks and mouse moves and hovers and things like that. So when you do that, you're able to do, like, you can see all these values, which is really fantastic if you need them. Now, in this case, I don't actually need them, so I'll get rid of them. But anyways, here's this situation. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and we'll put a little plus sign there so we can see what we're clicking. Okay, cool. There's our sweet click. And then, of course, if we wanted to, we could do another button minus, and we can now do something like this where we say, okay, tell us whether we want to, which mode are we in? We either add or subtract. Okay, so I'm just using the currying method to just define my click. So this case, I'll say, okay, I want you to add. In this case, I want you to subtract. And then what this will let us do is say, hey, are we in we can say, hey, is mode add? Well, then we will increment by 1. Otherwise, we'll increment by -1. And then we'll just do our, actually, let's just do update by count plus update by. There we go. Now I've got our nice little logic here. So now we move over here, I can subtract my clicks and I can add my clicks. Awesome. Pretty sweet. And then if I really wanted to, I could do a reset. I'm doing all this so that when we move this into a hook, we have a slightly more interesting.
How come the handle click is not being called over and over?
What do you mean? Oh, it's because I'm returning a function from it.
Oh, the callback is over there. Gotcha. I usually do it.
Yeah, I'm just returning a callback. Yep.
Ah, gotcha.
Yep. So now I can say on my reset mode, I can be like, okay, let's do a slight modification. So case add simply return +1. Let's do set count and then break. Case subtract set count. There's a more elegant way to do this, but I think this is fine for now. And if it's reset, then we will simply set count to whatever our props.initial count was. Cool. And over here, we will say handle click, reset. And there we go. Now I have a nice little working clicker. All right, so now this is cool and all. However, obviously this is not the most useful component, because if I wanted this functionality to exist in other places, I would literally have to copy and paste it over there, and I'd be duplicating a lot of effort. So that's where obviously hooks are useful. So let's move this over to a hook. Now, what's cool about hooks is that they're just functions. So they're really easy to do with TypeScript. All we have to do is define what our hook is. So let's create a function called counter hook, or sorry, a file called counter hook. Okay, and it's just a TS file. We're not returning any TSX or JSX components. So this will just be a TS file. Okay, now our function, we'll call it our use counter. So what our function is, it's actually going to be very, very basic. We're going to say, okay, my counter is going to have its initial count, okay, which is a number. And then our return value is going to be what our count is currently, as well as ways to adjust this count. And the benefit of hooks, or I guess like the whole purpose of hooks, is to kind of hide your implementation details and just expose an API for dealing with your internal state. So it's intended to be kind of like a black box that you don't care how it works. You just care that it gives you useful information and useful tools to do a particular task. So in this case, we simply care about updating a particular count. We're just adding or subtracting or resetting a number. How or what we do with that number is not the business of the hook. It's just there to give you a way of doing those functionalities. So we can essentially just take everything we just did and we can move it into this hook. Okay, now we've got to obviously make some changes. So props is not really a thing anymore. We could, of course, make this into an object if we wanted to. I could do something like interface use count hook options or something, and it could look like this. That's entirely fine, and I could call it props if I wanted to. Or maybe config would be a better term. I prefer to use config in this case. Okay, cool. And now we can replace props with config. So this is nice because if in the future I decided to make this more complicated, I can simply add options to this object without having to kind of mess around with things without having to mess around with this property. I don't have to like change it back to an object or anything. Like I can just simply add properties to this object as needed. While it's very much backwards compatible with what's already existing. Okay, now my hook, because I want to use it in the following way, I want to just simply say, hey, hook, give me the current count as well as ways to update that count. This is how I want to use it. And look at how nicely that just fits into my interface that I've already, or look how easily that fits into my implementation. Like this is beautiful. So, but I've got some work to do as far as defining the return value of this counter. So if we go over here, so far I haven't actually returned anything, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to say, okay, I want you to return the count as well as the handle click. It's convention to use an array because you can, of course, destructure that array into whatever values you want. You can name them whatever you want. So there is definitely a benefit to this. I've found that the larger this array gets, the more unwieldy it is, and I do tend to revert back to using objects as return values of hooks, because you can change the value. You can change their names anyways, so it doesn't really matter whether it's an array, frankly. But we'll go with the convention for now, because it is quite useful. Because I can call that whatever I want, but let's put it back to how it was, just so it fits with what we've got so far. Okay, cool. And oh yeah, let's obviously import the counter hook. Oh, export const. There we go. Okay, everything is fine except for the fact that it doesn't really know what this is. It's kind of yelling at us here. It doesn't really know what to do. All right, let's go back over here. All right. So far, our linter is yelling at us saying we're missing a return type in this function. Okay, so that means that we've got to define a return type for this. So okay, well let's do that. So let's say interface. We can call it counter hook API. You could call it counter hook value. I don't know. I like counter hook API because that's what it is. It's an interface that we can talk to. And we know that it is a array. So actually, sorry, this is not an interface. This is going to be we'll just use a type alias. We know that you are an array of a counter, which is a number, as well as a click handler, which of course is a function, but this is a special function, right? It's a function that returns a function. So it's a little more complicated than the function we're used to. In this case, we're going to say, okay, you're a function that returns a function that returns nothing. Because that's what this is. There's nothing actually happening in this switch. There's no return value here. All it's doing is calling the set count depending on what mode we're doing. So now it's going to yell at us if we try to define this counter hook API here, because handle click does not match. It doesn't match this type that we've given it yet. Okay. Notice we haven't defined the arguments to the function yet. We have to say, oh, hey, you're a mode, right? We have to say, hey, you're one of these things. Okay. Well, we can use an enum. We could use another type. So we'll call this counter modes, which is just either a add, a subtract, or a reset. And then down here, we can reuse that. We can say, hey, you are a counter modes. Okay, cool. So that seems to work just fine. We could make this even more concise by simply defining my use counter hook as such. You are a function that takes a use counter hook options, and you simply return a counter hook API. So then instead of defining those guys here and making that thing look really big, we can now just say you're just a use counter hook. And our hook has now been typed in a very concise way, at least in my opinion. I think it looks pretty good. You could even go further to type this click handler that's not in line, but I don't know, it seems fine to me. So there we go. Our click handler now matches, or our hook is now typed properly. And if we go to our app, everything seems to work just fine. Notice how all my types match up. I know that that's a number. I know that that's a currying function that allows us to configure various click handlers for various modes. Very cool. And then my counter is able to handle this configuration object. And if I go over here, it works the same way.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I know there's a lot. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, the one that if you go to the counter hooks,
Yeah.
at the end, so okay, I didn't know that you can return an array. Okay, that's good to know. I mean,
Yep.
it makes sense that that's what happens when you use a hook, but I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't make a connection.
Yeah, and also another thing you could do is, so right now the set count is only living in this function. Like there's no way to actually, like, let's say that I wanted to be able to set the number to something. I wouldn't, based on the API that it's giving me here, I don't have a way to do that from outside of it, right? I can either add one, subtract one, or reset to 0. But let's say I wanted to like set it to an explicit number, right? Then I've got a couple options. I could write another function that takes a number and then sets the count. But that's essentially what this method already is. So I could expose the set count function. However, that now complicates what our API is providing. So let me just make this a little easier to read. So now what we'd have to do is we'd have to add a new property here called set count. And the question, of course, is, well, wait a sec, how do we type that? If we look at what it actually is, based on what React use state gives us, it actually tells us exactly what it is. As we can see, the output of React use state is an array. And in this particular instance, because we provided it with a number as an argument here, or it's an object with a property that contains a number, we can see that we're getting an array back with a number as its first argument, and then this long, complicated type. Okay, well, let's break that down. All it is it is a dispatch. So that tells you it's a function of some sort, and they borrowed this language from Redux. And it's a dispatch that is taking a set state action with a number. So that tells you that it is a function that takes a number as an argument. But it's a special kind of function because it's, it's kind of built into the React clockwork. It's there's this underlying mechanism that set state does that's a lot more complicated, that's kind of buried in the React code that we don't really need to know about or care about. But it is useful to know what that type is, so that if we ever want to pass this around in our own custom way, we can at least know what the type is, so that it's easy for us to be like, oh, you're just a dispatch with the React dot set state action that takes a number as an argument. And now this is fine. And if I were and it works no matter what, I'm using as my value. Like, this could be some super complicated object. If that object has a type, then I simply can pass this guy around as a dispatch set state action with whatever that type may be.
How the app look like right now?
Say what?
The app. Yeah.
Yep, and the app's over here, and so then I could get my set count right there. So if I wanted to set it to some arbitrary number, this will be totally arbitrary. But now it can be like, okay, set count to, I don't know, 10. Set to 10. So now when I go over here, boom, now it's 10. And I can subtract, reset, set to 10.
Gotcha.
Yep. And in fact, I should not have called this handle click. What I should call this is just handle handle change, maybe handle. That's too close to an input event handler. I should just call this update count. Only reason why I say that is because the implementation of this hook is completely separate from its logic. This doesn't care what's causing this to update the count, right? There's no, it doesn't care, has no care in the world how you decide to use this function, right? This could be used in any situation. The fact that I'm using a button to change it is irrelevant. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, the fact that that's called update count makes more sense than calling it handle click, because I shouldn't assume that inside of this counter, this guy is being used as part of a click event. It's not its job to know or care about that. But then over here, because I'm using the destructuring, I can call that whatever I want. So in this case, I am using it on click, but that's just this particular case. I could write another component where it's not a click, it's actually like maybe a timer or something
Oh,
like that.
in line 10, we can call it anything we want. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep. Because it's destructuring. We're destructuring an array. That's the benefit of ES6 destructuring.
Makes sense.
Yep. But I tend, so this is just a personal opinion, and this doesn't really have anything to do with TypeScript, but my personal opinion, I prefer to do stuff like this. I prefer to use an object in most cases because, so let me just for argument put that into a object. What? Oh, right, because this is called update count. That's right. I was like, wait, there's something wrong. That's what it is. Okay. Update count. Set count. Update count. Oh, count. Count. Update count. Set count. Okay, there we go. Beautiful. Okay, now, so now I can't use that syntax anymore. I can destructure it though, of course. I could say count. Update count and set count. Of course, I just have to change these a little bit. Okay, now we're back to square one. Works great. Okay, now in this case, I don't like destructuring objects generally because there could be name collisions with other properties that have the same, or sorry, with other objects that have a property name that matches one of these property names. It's not likely, but it could happen. And that's one of the downsides of destructuring, is that you could accidentally destructure an object that has a property that where there's a variable that already exists with that name. So calling it the counter API now allows us to now allows us to kind of see things in the context of what it belongs to.
I see.
And that's just my personal preference, just from the last couple of years of coding on large projects. I've kind of found that this is a better pattern.
You cannot do that with an object. I'm sorry, with an array.
Well, you can, but if you did, you would have this weird, you'd have to be like,
Gotcha.
you know, which, so that's why doing the array thing is nice, because you can like just straight up define the name whatever you want. So you can like avoid name collisions a lot easier. Because if you destructure an object, you have no choice but to keep that name of the property. That's the whole purpose of destructuring. With an array, it allows you to destructure while also having the flexibility to give it its own name. But in both cases, the downside is that further on down the code, it's hard to remember which properties belonged to which interface. Keeping them wrapped up in a single object, I think, makes it easier to see like, oh, this is part of that guy. Cool. It's that's group. Those are group. These are all groups together. I can visually see that. And that's just a personal preference of mine.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah. But I don't know, it's not really related to TypeScript. That's just a code organization principle, I think.
Good to know. I never use a custom hook. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a custom hook.
So no, I haven't decided yet if I would like more on array or an object, but that's good to know both.
Yeah, no, dude, these are awesome. Custom hooks are amazing. Like they're so useful because what you can do is you combine them with contexts.
I was lying. Yeah, I have used a custom hook. Yeah, I have two custom hooks using context, but not this way. Yeah, using
Right.
context. I have used that.
Yeah, because like with context, this is really cool. So suppose I have some.
Have you used context in a way that slow down the application or no?
Yeah.
I was reading that slow that it renders more time.
Yeah, but I've never encountered like a problem with it. Not that it's not possible, but
Yeah. I was just reading. I'm like, oh, interesting.
yeah.
You know, there are people that love Redux, people that love context, people that love.
Right. I mean, yeah, like Redux solves the it solves the performance problem if you need to. But under the hood, they're the same thing. Like they use the exact same pattern. It's just that context is like literally hooked into the React updater mechanism.
Oh yeah, I know. I like context. I don't know if I apply in what I'm working the right way, but I like it so far. It's easier than Redux.
For sure.
Actually, you should learn. I learned Redux first. I believe now that I know both, I believe that you should learn context first before Redux. It gives you a better, but it's like it gives you just what is important.
Yeah, I agree.
Then Redux come and it give you like more than that.
Yeah, Redux was really hard for me to pick up because like there was so much boilerplate code that I didn't understand, and it drives me nuts when I see code that I don't understand. Like I'm not gonna just copy and paste code into something if I don't know what it's doing. And since there was so much boilerplate when I first learned it, like I spent so much time just reading the code to just try to figure out like all the connections.
Yes.
And
yes, I agree.
Yeah, it was kind of annoying.
Not
annoying, but it's like it was just a lot. I mean, I had fun learning it because I love learning this stuff, but like, yeah, it was tricky. All right, so here we go. So this is cool. So let's say that we were creating a context. We're creating a context, and it's the purpose of it is to provide some app level counter. So for some reason, we need to know these values everywhere in the application.
Okay.
For whatever reason. So we could, of course, so we're gonna go ahead and create our context, and we're gonna import our use counter hook. This is what's so cool about these hooks is that they're so composable. I can just pluck them anywhere. Alrighty, and then so we've got our, and then also let's export some of these types so that we can use them in other places. So the counter hook API is probably the most useful. So we'll take that guy. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to create a context. We don't know what this is yet, but we'll just say as counter hook API. Okay.
When you say they're so composable, and when you mention composition, what exactly? How do you define those terms?
Composition is just the idea of being able to kind of puzzle piece objects together without any sort of um, uh, strict hierarchical relationship. So, like in a hierarchy, you have your when you have a hierarchy, what that means is that at various levels of the hierarchy, things take certain precedence. So there's like a value judgment attached to a member of a particular level.
Mhm.
You know, it's like the middle class, the elites, the poor. We put value judgments on each of those levels. And so when you are so like in with classes, uh, when you could start with the animal class and then you can use that to create a more specific type of class which inherits all of the animal class properties, and then you add on to whatever your new one is, let's say mammals or plants or something. So there's now a structure to that, whereas in composition you just have individual fragments that you can just compose or just add together in arbitrary ways. So there's no necessary hierarchical or level of importance or value judgment that's attached to any particular fragment. They're just single isolated properties that you can piece together. That's what composition means.
When we're doing a custom hook, are we doing some type of composition?
There's an aspect of it, yes. So in this case, this is simply a function which outputs an object. There's no order attached to it. There's no inheritance attached to this. I simply have this object. And if in a new place, such as my app, in fact, I'll show you this in this counter context example. I think this will make more sense. So let's start with this, and then I'll show you how you could compose more hooks together to create more complex objects and interfaces. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So here's the context, and we will. Man, it's been a while since I've used
We have
this.
to import create context. Oh, no,
Yeah, so
you're
I
not-
already
you're
did
not-
that,
gotcha,
and
gotcha.
then I have to do the provider. Okay. So we'll call this the counter provider. Okay. This is just a function. And again, this is really just a function component. Right, so now we can just be like, okay, simply return. So here's our context value, which is just going to be our use counter. And we can say, okay, here's your initial count. If we wanted to get it from the provider, we could, I guess, but we'll just say initial count 0. Okay. Oh, that's an equal sign. Okay, so we know that that's the counter hook API. Cool. And now we can provider, right? Oh, this should be. Name that something else so that it's not stealing from this other place. Okay, so here's our counter context provider. That. this? Why doesn't that work? What am I missing? Because that has a consumer and a provider, or a. Sorry, it's been a minute since I've used this guy.
Let's go.
I could have sworn that you could just do that.
Yes, you can. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, why isn't it letting me do that? And then I pass in a value. It's not the consumer. I know that I could get provider and consumer. Let's do this. Okay, so then our value is just the, no, I don't want. Ugh, go away.
There's an extra comma.
Oops, thank you. What is going on here? Oh, duh, I can do that. I forgot, it has to be lowercase. Lowercase, okay. Right? Dude, I'm totally forgetting this.
I used that. I don't remember. Great.
All right, let me look something up really quick. Yeah, that's literally what I just did. I said const counter context is that thing. And then I'm literally doing that. Like,
Do you think it's because the what is in parentheses that you have curly braces as contact hook API? Like the
you're talking about this one?
Yeah.
No, that's just the default value of what the context actually is.
Okay.
Like without that, it just yells at me for not passing something in. Like that could be null. It doesn't really matter what it is. So this is really strange to me that this is not. That's so weird to me. It's saying cannot find namespace counter context. Oh my God, I know why. Stupid. I needed to name that a TSX file. Gosh. Okay, everything's fine. Because if I'm gonna define this provider here and use JSX, I gotta make sure that's a TypeScript JSX file. There we go. Okay, now we're good. I was just like, what is going on? I was like, I swear this is the right way to do it. Okay, cool. So there's that. And now we can say props.children. Right. So we'll just make sure that's props and we'll just say props with children. And you just have an empty object. Facts on the student. Does that work that way? Okay. One more. Okay, there we go. All right. Okie dokie. So here's our provider. Here's our context value, which is, we already know is that counter hook API, which is really just, it's just this guy. So this just, as you know, with the context, this object is now available everywhere in the application once I hook it up here. Get our counter context. Oops. There. Sort of provider. We'll wrap this around the app. Just like that. Oh, I miss React. This is so nice.
I have seen that some people create different providers for different value and they don't pass just the object. I don't know if it's because strict reference of the object or something like that. I was reading. I don't know. I was checking that actually a few days ago. Like instead of pass like context value, they will create like for example, I was using they will create what is called this, the context value. They will create one for the value, one for the set value, and we have 3 values, one for the handle click. For every single value, they will create one provider here. And then, so instead of
Every
just,
value have one provider?
yes, so line 11 and 12 will have 2, and then you will pass you will destructure on line 8, and then you will pass only whatever it is, I don't know, value equal value or set value equal set value. And
So
then
there's a separate, so there'd be a separate provider for every.
like in the app, you will use content provider, but in this little utility function, you will have 3 or 3 in this case, right? We have 3 values.
You wouldn't, I don't know why you'd want to use multiple providers.
I believe it's because if so what's really something that, and even most of the tutorials do that.
So well, the problem with that is that you wouldn't be able to like, okay, so for example, I could make other contexts.
No,
Well,
no, but
first of all, the only way to get multiple providers would be to create multiple. Would be to create multiple contexts. I'd have to create many of those.
Yes, you
So the problem with that is that would mean that each one of these has its own isolated state.
Yes.
So now that's fine if I wanted to have other. Now it's useful to have other providers if I had like, let's say I wanted to make an authentication scheme. I wouldn't put it in here. I'd have a separate provider for that. But the idea is you'd have a single provider for a specific type of service.
I have seen that what they do is like, usually it's 2. Usually, like for example, in this case, is click and set click or something like that.
Right. So it's the state value and then the state setter. Yeah,
they will do that for one and one for the other. And then for line 5 and line 6 will have 2, and then line 12 and line 13 they will have 2.
So you're saying that it would have I don't understand the purpose of that though.
I don't know exactly what, but they're saying that if you don't do if you don't do that, then you have to use memo. For again, I'm reading as I'm telling you these things. I don't know. I don't have it clear. I'm gonna have to read more about it.
Because like if I were to, well, so in one case, okay, so I could do this. I could say, I could say export const. Let's call this the let's let's call this the setter counter setter context, I guess. And then we'll call this the const counter API context. So then this would have to be a little different. This would have to be like, I'm honestly not sure what this would be yet. I'll do any for, I don't like that. Let's do, I don't know, an array for now, I guess. Okay, so, and then this again, I'm not sure what that would be yet, quite yet. I can kind of reason my way through this. Okay, so here we go. Here we have our, in this case, we have our account, we have the updater, and then we have the setter, right? So these have been determined by our hook. Okay, so our hook is what's providing these. So, and just looking at this, I don't understand where what purpose they would have for creating something like this, where you have a, in this case, for example, this value here. So yeah, so I used an array. So here's our count and our setter, but then to, oh, that would be the counter setter context. So, okay, so there's that. This will be, I don't know, number and then function void. That's actually gonna. Let's do, oh, wait, that's an actual, it's, to do this counter or number and then function that doesn't return anything, void. Okay, Typescript doesn't let me do that. Let's do undefined just for now. Okay, that's fine. But the problem is that this, okay, so here's the problem I see with doing a pattern like this is, first of all, like it's, so the use memo, all use memo is a way of preserving state changes, or sorry, it's a way of preserving render cycles. It's a way to like not re-render so many times with the same data being shown every time, because that anytime that you re-render something that's the same as it was last time, you've done more work than is necessary. So use memo is basically a performance enhancer, or not enhancer, it's just a way of being performant. Because what it means is that it says, hey, don't render something unless you absolutely have to. So I'd have to read the article. If you have like a link to the article or something, I'd be interested in reading it, because I don't understand where they're coming from. Because I don't see how this has anything to do with.
I will send to you. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'm looking for it. I don't find it.
Okay. Well, if you find it, feel free to send it to me, because maybe it's I don't have enough information, but like just looking at this pattern, I don't see how this does anything to benefit that at all. Because all this does is making it harder to use a hook that I've created, right? I have this hook that provides this nice, beautiful interface for interacting with it.
No,
And
I mean,
then-
it will be the same because you use content provider. And then once you put content provider in the app, then you forget about this, whatever you wrote here.
No, but the problem is defining what these values are.
Oh, because you're using TypeScript.
Well, even if I wasn't using TypeScript, it would be kind of like, yeah, if I wasn't using TypeScript, it would be a little easier to just kind of manually just, do what I want it to do. But the fact that TypeScript is having such a hard time with this tells me that, like, well, what it's asking, basically TypeScript, all it's doing is saying, hey, what kind of value do you want this to be? And I'm looking at it, I'm just like, oh, well, now I suddenly have to change. I have to think about what the shape of this value is that I'm passing in here, and which is fine. I can of course break this down into just the number and the count. Like that's fine. Like I can just as well say, okay, you're a number and you're a React dispatch with a React dot
And sorry, can you give me 2 minutes?
yeah.
Hey, sorry about that.
Hey, you're good.
I needed to borrow my computer and get from my iPad. So yeah, as soon as I find the article, I will send you. But something I read that I remember was something because when it's an object, the way it was before it is an object, it's like it reference something. So it creates re-renders because it's referential or something like that. I believe it's something that has to do with how objects work in plain JavaScript, but I'm gonna send you the article.
Okay. Because, like, because I could totally make each one of these its own value, but then the problem is that I have to create a the problem is that I have to then create a provider for each one, but then which then means that I have to create a consumer for each one. And they're supposed to be bundled together because I've got a hook here which has 3 properties on it, and I want to be able to use them like together because they're they're related to each other. All these things here are related to each other. And in fact, I actually totally use this as the wrong counter API. Okay, so like I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense to me to avoid setting these to objects because that's the whole purpose of state, is that it's a complex data structure that needs to be managed in a effective way. So I can understand creating different providers for like fundamentally different functionalities of the application. Like that makes total sense. And that's what I recommend to people is you don't just have one provider, which just has like all of your states in one place. Like that doesn't make sense. Like you'd want to have like an auth provider, which only deals with maybe logging in and logging out a user and authorizing them for certain pages. That would be a nice provider, standalone provider. But then you have another provider for routing, and that's in fact what the React router is when you install it and import it. It's basically just a context that just deals with rendering certain components based on the window location. And then you can have other contexts for dealing with, very particular, use cases of your application. Like if you're, for example, if you have lots of data and you are rendering grids, then it can be useful to have a provider which contains sorting and filtering, for example, or also user profile data, or user settings, things like that, where you have like specific preferences for a user that changes the behavior of the app depending on who's logged in. Like you could have a single provider just for user preferences. That is also really useful. But those are all different providers, but they're all providing fundamentally different things.
Makes sense.
So I'm wondering if maybe there's an aspect of that you were reading about, but I'm not sure.
Gotcha. No, I'm pretty sure it was in line 13 that it was when you put value equal to an object, just to an object, plain object, was something about that. Like the way you were doing counter API is an object.
Like this.
No, without the curly braces.
Well, there's no other way to do it. This is the JSX syntax.
Oh yeah, that's but what I'm saying, yes, counter API is an object because. But yeah, I'm gonna find the article. I'm gonna read more about it too.
Yeah, because like the thing is that what if you have like if that's just a like a
because usually the way I did it is I created 2, because usually you only have one that is for the state and one that set the state, so it's not that bad. You put just 2 here and you use
right, but use state can also be an object.
Yes,
like
I haven't used it as an object.
Right, because there's nothing to stop me from doing something like.
Oh no, I use it as an object. It's just I was using use reducer, so.
Okay, yeah, use reducer is, but I mean, like at the end of the day, state is using a certain type of dispatch reducer pattern. But like this is a perfectly acceptable state. And it's very useful to have objects together like this. Because if you are only dealing with primitive values, that becomes really difficult to manage, because then you could potentially have, that would mean that you'd have to create a provider for every single value on your object.
No, but it was in terms of state and dispatch, because I couldn't send us an object like state comma dispatch, which is state was a state and dispatch is a setter. So I don't know if that applies to, it only applies to when you use the use reducer hook, but I definitely gonna find out because I have to read more about that.
Yeah, I don't know, because the way that I'm gonna do it right now,
But the way
is-
you're doing it is the way that I have seen it also many people doing it.
yeah, and this is, as far as I know, this is like the proper way to do it, because the thing is that this is just the initial value of the provider. We're just saying, hey, look, start with this. And then our consumer, and then the thing is that our consumer, and let me change these back to what it was. And this is going to be counter hook API. So,
And I have 5 minutes because I have to take my cousin to get something to eat.
no worries, no worries.
Okay.
So here's our counter context, and we're just providing our we're calling our hook, which gives us our interface, and then our interface is simply plopped into our provider. We go to our app, which we will we'll take this out, or actually no, index is what I meant to do. So here is our counter provider, which is process. Oh. Yeah. I'm gonna do a record string unknown. Alrighty. So over here, we've got our counter provider. Here's our app with our initial count, I guess. And then in our app, we can now, so now we're not even using our counter API anymore. We're simply going to use, we're just going to grab our context from our counter context. Okay, and then we can now get our value. So we'll get our counter API from use context. And then here's our counter context. And now we have exactly what we want. We no longer are using this. That got moved somewhere else. We can tell our app now to not worry about that. App props now just is just this little okay. Just a little rack component. And now we have essentially the same thing. So if we go over to our thing, Should be good now. Okay, cool. And now we're back to where we were. So I can now, so now it works the exact same way. It's just that if I were to use multiple contexts, like if I were to use this in multiple places, I wouldn't have a problem. So I don't know, I could make some sort of other component, JSX, no, but, but then we'll just use our counter context. So I'll just import these guys into here. Context, counter context. And then here we can just display our account again.
So you create a new component to show that you can use it different places.
Yeah. So like this is just to show that if I wanted to show the same count somewhere else,
Gotcha.
I can, oh, whoops, I'm supposed to say TSX. Okay. And then when I go to my app, I can now import my test from the test component location. So there's that. And then I can just as a there we go. So we'll now just see it in a different place. And you can see that they're changing in sync because they're coming from the same exact state. Like they're referencing the exact same value, which is why we're able to, which was why we're able to see them there. And if I wanted to, I could create, buttons to then change it here so that it showed there, etc.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really confused as to.
Yeah. Would you be available at 8 or tomorrow? Maybe if no.
I'm available tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow. Okay. Around what time?
Like later afternoon, evening, like 4 or 5.
4? Okay.
I'll send
you. Okay, I'll send you a quick Zoom link. So.
All right, cool.
I can show you. I'll send you the links as soon as I find. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, Ben. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. See you.